to our final presentation of the day, Micro-Credentials, New Models for Learning in STEM.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone for joining us. Are we seeing my slides?
We're seeing your desktop right now, Casey.
Let's do that. Okay. We good on slides now?
Yes, it's not. Yep, we are good.
So thanks for joining us. My name is Casey Fenton. I'm a multimedia specialist in the Office for Digital Learning in the College of Engineering. And I'm joined here by 3 faculty in our departments, Moses Ling, Andrea, Gregg, and Eric Marsh. So I'm going to kick things off, but then really hand it over to the faculty to talk about what's actually happening in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and the Department of Architectural Engineering. I'm starting with a resource that Andrea pointed me to called the Gartner Hype Cycle, because I was giving a presentation at TLT Symposium about micro-credentials and badging in, I believe it was 2013. And there was a real air of excitement about digital badges back then. I think we had 6 or 7 panelists in that presentation and everybody was excited. But then we kind of went quiet for several years. I know there are some units that are doing some digital badging work, but that excitement we saw 7 or 8 years ago, really died down. And so the Gartner Hype Cycle kind of describes that. When you look at new technologies, there's an innovation trigger that gets folks excited. There's this peak of inflated expectations, and then the trough of disillusionment, and then the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of productivity. So I think that right now, we're at the beginning of the slope of enlightenment. And I think the important difference between 2013 and today is that in 2013, there were a lot of folks like me, staff or folks in the education technology community who were excited about this new technology. And we were going out to faculty and saying, how can we deploy this in your programs or in your courses? After that quiet period, I started having faculty come to me saying, hey, we're creating these new learning opportunities for students. How can we recognize them for doing it? Or how can we help them communicate what they learned to a potential employer? And so I think that's an important shift that it's putting us on this slope of enlightenment when it comes to digital badging. And for that reason, the bulk of today's presentation is going to be about what these faculty are working on in their departments. I do, for those who are curious, want to give a very quick tour of the technology that we're using. And I'll just put up the offer that, on the last slide, you'll see my contact information. If anybody wants a more robust tour of this platform, I'm happy to set something up with you. But we're using the Acclaim platform by Credly. This is what a badge looks like on that platform. For those of you familiar with digital badges, you'll recognize the familiar bits of metadata. But the important thing is that the badge needs to communicate precisely what the student did to earn it. And so that's done through a combination of course, a title, a description, and the criteria. Some badges can also include evidence. And one of the important reasons that we chose the Credly platform is because it can host its own evidence. And so if they produced a paper or a video, it would live right here in the badge. And Credly adds some other bits of metadata that you may not have seen in other digital badges. So they have these skill tags. And if you were a student that earned this badge and you clicked on those skills, it would take you out to job listings that contain those keywords. And then they have some categories that you can select in terms of type, level, time, etc. So that's what a badge looks like. Every organization on the Credly platform has a badge page where you can organize badges by collections or just display all of the badges that you're offering. And then there are some administrative tools that were important to us in the platform. One, the ability to grant different users different access levels. Of course, a dashboard where you can manage all of your badges. And then some pretty easy to use analytics. And I'm going to turn this over to the faculty to talk about what's going on, but we'll end today's talk by looking at some of the analytics we saw in our early offerings. So with that, I want to turn it over to Andrea to talk about what we're actually doing with this technology.
Okay, thanks, Casey. Hi, everyone. So this approach generally applies to what architectural engineering and mechanical engineering have been doing for the past couple of years. One thing to note is that predominantly thus far, our badging or our activities that have then been badged are in-person workshops. We are looking towards what it might be like to do some of these online, and especially with recent circumstances, we've gotten a lot more requests for that. But so far, they've been in-person workshops. They are typically 4 to 8 hours. Interestingly, ME students seem to prefer weekday evenings, and AE students seem to prefer Saturdays. So I tried to get our students to go to Saturdays, but they weren't having it. So the workshop, it involves an industry professional, often an alum or someone related to the field. For the ME ones, somebody who's achieved a marked level of success in their field. And then, so in addition to presenting content on the topics, which we'll talk about the type of topics in a second, we encourage the speakers to do some sort of hands-on, some interactive, some applied activity. And then at the end, there's some sort of assessment. It could be project-based, it could be objective quiz, but something so that we have a threshold to say, did you earn the badge or did you not? And we want it to be beyond just a participation badge. So in terms of the next slide, we we separated these slides out because interestingly, mechanical engineering and architectural engineering, while there's a lot of overlap in sort of why and how we're doing this, there's some important differences as well that sort of demonstrate that there's not a one size fits all with even why you want to use badges, which is what makes them so flexible and I think appealing across a different number of realms. But for ME, we, from working with our industry partners there and just research in general that we've all known for years, there's a significant gap in kind of industry hiring highly technical undergrads who are lacking, they could be called the 4 C's, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, soft skills, business skills, those sort of things that allow you to work across teams, across departments, et cetera. And so that was identified. And then we've also done alumni survey with our grads a few years into the workforce and asked, what do you wish you'd learn when you were in mechanical engineering? What do you wish you'd been exposed to? And we bring in industry expertise largely because they have expertise that our faculty may not. So in terms of these areas. And our curriculum, like most STEM curriculum, is very rigorous, very tight. So there's not a lot of wiggle room, and it's not always agile enough to reflect the newest approaches. And as we all know, getting a new course into rotation is easier said than done. So this has allowed us to address topics that are relevant, current, but not necessarily integrated into any particular classes. So some examples, project management, which has been our most popular one. And these are typically done in the context of engineering and somewhat more in the context of mechanical engineering. Value engineering, which relates to the cost of creating something versus the profit of selling it. And there's a whole field of there. And what the speaker there, who's actually Vice President at Lockheed Martin, always says is students, recent hires come on knowing how to put all the things together. But the first question they get asked is, how much does it cost to make? And that's not necessarily something they're taught, but it becomes one of the most important things that impacts what they do. digital engineering, which is essentially Industry 4.0, how to make an engineering film, which seems very specific, but actually is a somewhat general topic in terms of teaching students contemporary communication to be able to present a complex technical idea and make it compelling to an audience of potential decision makers. So there's a lot of communication strategies built in there as well. So I will hand it to Moses at that point.
Thank you, Andrea. In architecture engineering, the program is already a 5-year program, and we have it pretty well packed with core coursework and some elective coursework. And the curriculum is, if you can think of it, as divided into 4 separate specialties. And they are structural, mechanical, lighting, electrical, and construction. Students in the 4th and 5th year specialize in one of those. There are opportunities where we would want to engage all these specialties at the same time. And we've coined a phrase, mission-driven integrated design. We tie together these curriculum silos, if you will, horizontally into an opportunity to learn how, say, healthcare is designed and addressing each one of these specialty areas. So micro-credential became that vehicle that lets us do that. In the healthcare design, we actually used it to supplement a design studio where most of the time in the studio is spent on the actual working of the design. And we use a Saturday micro-credential session to supplement where 6 or 7 of our alumni spoke on their work about healthcare design and how it bridges the different specialties. So we use it in multiple ways. We certainly also use it to develop depth in other areas like smart buildings and so on. Data center essential is also one of those where the speaker tied together all the aspects in a horizontal fashion. Next slide, please. Everybody that says they would love to talk about their work are equipped to do that. We have to spend some time with some speakers developing their skill sets as well as their format of presentation. Some of them present all the time to societies and within their own office, and they come totally equipped. But there are certainly a set of speakers that we invest some time with them. And with every module that we offer, we have an assessment tool that we use. That's a lot of times developed by the speakers themselves. We work with them, and we have it not so much to test the students to a level of expertise, but to test that the students really did pay attention and did get something out of that. As Casey says, that we advertise these micro-credentials as the students having picked up some skill set. And not everybody can come on a Saturday either, even though we host it on a Saturday. So we have recorded them. We initially was not intending to have recorded sessions playback, but with our stay-at-home time being extended, this summer we are actually replaying certain ones of these workshops as an online session that it's not the best prepared, but it was the recording of the presentation that allows the student to take advantage of it during the little bit more free time this summer. So we are working on both formats, and we are developing new in-person sessions for later in the summer and in the fall. These sessions, like I said, will fill in the gaps in the curriculum, and these are identified both in conversation with alumni and amongst ourselves. And the core set of workshop that we are developing, it's not something that we have a grand plan for, but we are experiencing good success, and we see that students perhaps at certain stage are not quite ready for that level of instruction, might want to take it at a later time. So we are developing these core set of badges that we would re-offer from time to time. And there are opportunities where these badges could lead to a 3-credit course. We actually have one ongoing right now on smart building standards, that a 3-credit course is being developed at the same time we're developing the badge, and the badge will become a primer to the course itself. And we are exploring potentials for a paid version of this for our alumni. Something that might be of interest to the alumni is how building information modeling is progressing in industry, and that they might like to look at how things are developing that they perhaps would not have time to in their regular work hours. Another one is that we have developed one so far workshop on the FE exam. That's the first stage of the professional engineering exam, that we did a review course on engineering economics. So those are things that potentially has a market for a paid version of these, but we have certainly not done enough homework or step into that area. Now I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk about the mechanical engineering going on.
All right, thank you, Moses. So welcome everyone. The version that we are offering in mechanical engineering has quite a few similarities with what Moses described for architectural engineering, but there are also some differences. I think from the outside, the biggest difference is what Moses mentioned, his students coming in on a Saturday or a Sunday to attend class. That's pretty special. We haven't had that good fortune. The marketing of these topics to the students is turning out to be an area that we continue to work on. I think that the topics that have been identified by, as Andrea mentioned, our industrial advisory board are self-evidently interesting and important to our students. However, they lead a very busy life, and we need to help them find some space to attend these workshops. We have about 600 or 700 students in our mechanical engineering program. We don't get all 600 or 700 students in attendance at these workshops, but we are working on a new plan this year to move it in that direction. When you talk to the students, they recognize the value of these offerings, but they're just working so hard. So the direction we're going in the fall, and this will hold true even in an online format, is we're actually going to integrate these micro-credential workshops into a half-credit junior level seminar class and a half-credit senior level seminar class. These courses deal with topics outside of traditional ME mechanical engineering subjects. And so we will still work with the industrial speakers that Andrea described. However, the students will attend as a component of this coursework that they'll be completing to satisfy the ME degree requirements. I want to mention another thing that Moses and Andrea touched on. The folks that we've been able to entice to offer these workshops are typically highly placed industrial experts with knowledge that ME faculty don't necessarily possess. And they are, to a person, outstanding public speakers, but they're not necessarily educators. And these folks have the ability to talk about these topics indefinitely. But what Andrea works with them extensively on in advance of their presentation is breaking up their presentation into more manageable chunks and incorporating what we would regard as sort of active learning principles to keep the students engaged and interested in these topics. The other point I wanted to make is that we have several active student groups within mechanical engineering who we also want to, in the future, get involved with the organization of these workshops so that we can address not only what the industrial folks think the students should know, but what the students think they are missing from their traditional mechanical engineering curriculum. And as Moses mentioned, the last point is that in the future, there is the possibility that we could publish these workshops to a wider audience, folks beyond our students, perhaps alumni or other groups as well. As we heard from the previous presentation on podcasts, though, it is a relatively crowded marketplace in that sense. So that's something that is probably a little further down the road. All right. I guess Casey is next. Yes.
Okay, yeah, so I just want to wrap this up by looking at some of the data. So you've heard from everyone, there are a whole variety of things that have gone on and things that they're planning to do. Thus far, we've issued we've issued 267 badges to students across 11 different workshops. That was all. There were several more planned for this spring, and those were obviously put on hold. It's interesting when I share the data, and depending on who sees it, they'll have a different reaction. So here is an example. On the left here, we see that we've issued 267 badges. 153 students have accepted them. So when you are issued a badge, you receive an email saying, Penn State College of Engineering just issued you this credential, click to accept, or something like that. Only 57% of folks accepted that. So some people will see that and say, students don't care about badges. Other people will see it and say, oh, students are just so invested in the learning experience, they don't need the token. So you can look at it optimistically or pessimistically, but we do want to share what we're seeing in terms of student interest here. I think there's a possibility that in 2 years, we're going to find out that some of those 114 who are still pending are all of a sudden interested in the badge when they're looking to build resumes and LinkedIn profiles, and we'll be getting emails at that time, but we'll see. What I do find really interesting is that of those who did accept the badge, 70% of them put it on their LinkedIn profile. And so I think that shows that the students are seeing some value in communicating the skills they're picking up in these workshops with their professional networks or future professional networks. They're not so interested in putting it anywhere else on social, as you can see. And the other interesting number that, again, some people will perceive as low and some people will perceive as great is that for each one of those shares on LinkedIn, badges get 3.7 views. So that's not impressions on LinkedIn, but that's actually somebody seeing it on their student's LinkedIn profile and clicking it to see what it is and what the student did. So per share, that's 3.7. And again, we're just putting these numbers out here for folks that might be thinking about badging, because there are two big questions that I always get are, do students care about them and do employers care about them? This speaks to the student data. I think the employer data is a little bit harder and specific to maybe the discipline or the industry. But I think with that, we can open it up for questions. And again, our contact information is here. If anybody, specifically, if you want to reach out to me about a more robust tour of the Credly platform, I'd be happy to do that. Any questions?
We don't currently have any in the Q&A or chat, but I was wondering if you, we just got one. Jackie asked, could you share the platform for badging?
Can we share the platform for badging? So I can share that it's called Acclaim by Credly. We bought a certain number of badges to be used in the College of Engineering. I have worked with other folks, and I'm happy to do so with anyone to give them access to the platform to look around, see how it works, but it's not something that we can share and like in terms of letting you issue badges out of that platform. But if it's something you're interested in and you want to look around, I can do that.
The libraries also, Tori Raish would be the one to copy or to contact there. She may even be on this. They do a lot with badging, and they have a somewhat different approach, and they actually run the badges not from a service like Claim, but from the Penn State badging sys platform. So to the 2 questions in the Q&A, if you use the Penn State badging system, you can do it, you can access it that way. Again, Tori Raish is a great person to talk to. She's been leading the efforts in the library for years, and has a lot of expertise on how it works. It's been integrated into a number of courses, etc.
Yeah, and to Eric's question about whether we have to jump through hoops, actually the most difficult process that we had to go through was getting permission to put the Penn State shield on the badges. But working with strategic communications, we did get approval to do that. But otherwise, I mean, there are the typical hoops you have to jump through of having, you know, purchasing, look at contracts with Credly. But if Credly is something you're looking at, you know, we've done that, so they're an approved vendor now. There is a Credly integration with Canvas that is not currently approved for Penn State security reasons, but hopefully other obstacles have already been removed on the Credly front.
Yeah, for what it's worth, the mechanical engineering version of the badges and the architectural engineering version of the badges are somewhat different, and they both coexist just fine. So I think there's, aside from the issues that Casey mentioned, there's pretty good flexibility available to instructors and organizers who want to do something like this.
To address Marcus's question, the architecture engineering versions of it will become more and more online this summer, and who knows how the fall semester is going to end up. But if there are opportunity to engage the Kamau campus student while we have the online versions available, that would be of interest to us. So we probably can look at how to promote that to a broader student population. I would be interested in hearing from you if you have any ideas how we can get in touch with these students, or maybe through the campus themselves.
Sean asked a question about whether anyone outside of the engineering programs can earn these badges. And I think it will be on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, workshops have been open to, certainly, I mean, the ME workshops are not necessarily limited to ME students. The AE workshops are not necessarily limited to AE students. And I believe, Moses, I've seen architecture students from the College of Arts and Architecture attend some of the AE workshops, and we can issue them badges. So yes, it is available. There may be certain cases where one of the workshops limited to a certain audience, but for the most part, they're open.
We have had students from other engineering programs participate as well, so not just our own engineers.
Okay, well, that's just about all the time we have today. So thank you so much, Casey, Andrea, Eric, and Moses, for sharing the ways that you've used micro-credentialing initiatives to help students prepare for their future careers in engineering. And we want to thank all of our presenters today for sharing their work with our audience and continuously striving to improve the learning experience for our Penn State students. And lastly, thank you to our audience members for taking the time to join us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you all at our next session.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.